what is a one-to-one relationship? Let's say we have a list of items stored in our database and we want to connect each item with a single serial number. We also want that serial number to be assigned to only one item. In this case, they need to have a one-to-one relationship. This is what we will learn in this video, and it's going to be super simple. You can see that our item has only one ID, a name, and a price. I'm just going to start by seeing here that our name property in this case has this kind of error. The properties by default are declared as non-nullable, and the compiler basically just wants to remind us that we haven't initialized the value for this property yet. Now, in some cases, we would want to add the question mark after the property type. The error would go away. But in some cases, if we would not want our property to be null, for example, so that we can skip this error, we can just give it an initial value here, like null with the exclamation mark. And basically this gives the name property a temporary null value. So just to remove this warning that the compiler gives us, we give it a temporary value where telling the compiler that we do not want our property to be null, but basically we will take care that we give it a value in the future. I hope that's not complex. And now back to our one-to-one relationship model. I'm gonna need to create a new class in our models folder. I will name this serial number. And let's give it like an ID property. As you can see, the integers and numbers usually don't take an error because by default they can be null actually. But if we will give the serial number a name as well, and to escape this warning, we'll give it an initial value here. And now we're just going to need these two properties for the serial number alone, but now to connect it to our item with a one-to-one relationship, we're just going to need to connect it with an ID, for the ID of the item. I'll write it here, item ID. And also we'll specify here that this will be connected to an item model. And I'm going to need to specify on top of this item property that the foreign key, basically how we will connect this item, this property to the actual item, is that we're going to use the item ID property. So we're using this data annotation to basically connect the item with our serial number using the item ID as a foreign key. And here I'm actually going to use the question mark on top of both of these properties because we want to make it easy for us that we do not have to connect the serial number with an item just as soon as we create this model. We can give it a value later on. We create firstly the model, let's say we create the item, and then afterwards we can connect it to a serial number and vice versa. So I'm just going to go to the models folder one more time. I'm going to go to the item model as well, and I'm going to connect it to the serial number. I'm going to need the serial number ID property and a serial number property named serial number. So basically what we're saying here is that we'll connect this model with a serial number, the item model, and we're going to use the serial number ID as the foreign key basically, but we do not need to specify this data annotation in both of our models. In one of them it's enough. And I'm going to set this to be nullable as well here, so that, as I also said before, we do not have to specify the serial number ID just as soon as we create a new item model. Now that we have this clarified, let's just go to the context. I'm going to need a dbset instance for our serial number model. Serial number I'll name it serial numbers in plural. For us to give some initial data to an item and a serial number in our database, we can use here we're going to need to override a method in that entity framework provides us. So I'm just writing here protected override void, since the method won't provide anything, that on model creating. And what this on model creating does here, this is like a method that entity framework core has, which takes a model builder class as a parameter, which is a class that will allow us to configure the different configurations for our models and the relationships with them. So actually by default, there exists an on model creating class in entity framework core that configures our items, our models, and the relationship between them by default, but now we are overriding it to specify either the data for our models when they are initialized or the relationship between them. So just inside this method here, what we're going to do is I'm going to use the model builder parameter, which was this class that we'll use to add configurations. And I'm going to write that entity. I'm going to write for the item first. So I'm just going to use a method has data here. Just a model has data here to give some data for a model, basically to create a model in our database for the item. How we can do this is I'm just need to write here new item, and I can, let's say, specify the ID to be like 4. I don't know, it's a number. I don't know if I have an ID with an ID of 1 in my database. The ID is an integer, so no double quotations are needed. The name of our item, I'll set it like a microphone, I don't know, some item. And now I'm gonna add the serial number ID. Do I have a price for the items? I think I do. Okay, I'll set the price to be, I don't know, price to be $40 or something. And the serial number ID, which will be the ID of the serial number, is I'll input like a number here, like 10, and then I'll need to create a serial number with the ID of 10 so that these two models will be created. Just like I created an item in our database, I'm going to create a serial number as well. So I'm just going to need to write here serial number. We're creating a new serial number. I'll use the ID of 10 so that the first item will be connected to our serial number. I'll name it like, the name was a string, I guess, so I'll name it like Ike, like 150 or something, just some code that just what could represent a serial number actually. And now I think the only property left is the item ID, which I'll set it equal to 4 so that it will be connected to our first item. After we have created two models in our database, we have the database instances here for the models tables to be created in our database. I'm just going to need to go to Package Manager console and add the migrations. So add migration. I'm just writing here one-to-one so that we know for this migration we added a one-to-one relationship in our database. You can name it whatever. Hit on enter. Okay, now we just need to update these migrations, this database schema that was created here to the database. Everything seems to be done correctly. Now, so that we show this on the screen actually, I'm just going to go to our context, to our index page. And when we load the items from our context, we need to specify here that we want to access the serial numbers as well. We just gonna need to write an include method after writing context.items, after accessing items in our context. And after that, writing here include, just gonna need to get a variable here and access with it the serial number. Now that we have access to the serial numbers from our items, we can go to the index page and also display the serial number in a column. So here, like in the table header, just write here serial number, and we'll access it from the database here by just writing item dot serial number dot name of the serial number. We can just run our application now and go to the index page. Let's go here to /index /items, the name of the controller, /index. Now we're getting an error here while processing this in our index page, and the error is actually happening because we have specified this serial number in the item that it could be null. For us to avoid this, we can just give a question mark after accessing the serial number here from the database, and in case it is null, nothing will be displayed in that column. If not, we'll access the name of the serial number. Let me just run the application one more time. And here we should see a microphone priced $40 and the serial number is mic 150. So we have connected a microphone with a one-to-one relationship with a serial number, and actually vice versa as well. And if we would try to, we cannot connect this serial number with another item actually. Even if we would try to do this either in the context or in our database, this would give us an error. And the first item actually here, we haven't connected it to a serial number yet. That's why this column is empty for the moment. Let's say we have a list of items stored in our database and we want each item to belong to a single category. In this case, one category can be assigned to many items, but each item can belong to only one category. This requires a one-to-many relationship between the category and the items. In this video, we'll learn exactly how to set this up, but don't worry, it's not that complicated. We'll connect our models to each other, make the necessary changes in our action methods, and then see how it looks on the front end. So let's get back to the project and let's go back to the item model as our main model, and we can actually connect this to like a category. And a category is like a one-to-many relationship model with the item, but from the category's side. So a category, let's say electronics, books, or something like that, can have multiple items be part of it, but a specific item can be part only of one category. So how we can write this relationship? Let's just go to the models folder and add a new class. Let's name it category, and I will give it normally an int ID property, a name for the name of the category, and I'll initialize it so that we skip the warning that the compiler gives us. So giving it like an initial value and telling the compiler we'll set a value to this name later. And then we can connect this, we should connect this with a list of items. I'll name it items, and I will make this property to be nullable with the question mark, so that when we firstly create a new category, for example, we do not need to connect it with an item right away. We can add this later on. So one category can have multiple items, but if we go back to the items model, one item can have only one category. So I'm going to need a public int ID property, not int ID, but let's say category ID, and a public category named category, specify the foreign key here so that our category will be connected, our item will be connected with the category model by using the category ID property as a foreign key, and I'm gonna make both of these properties as nullable so that if we have created a new item, we do not need to specify the category right away. Now that we have specified how this relationship looks in our model classes, I'm gonna go to the context and add a dbset instance for us to be able to store this category model in our database as a model instance. So I'll write here category, name it categories in plural as a practice. And I'm gonna create manually 2 categories in our database. So I'll use this model builder class as well, that entity that category that has data method. And just write here a new category. Let's say an ID of 1 and the name of, let's say firstly electronics. And I'm just not gonna connect this with an item right now. We're gonna set it up in our action method so that we can do it, let's say, interactively in our application. And like a new category as well would be okay. I'll give it the ID of 2 and I'll name it, let's say, something else like books. Now I'm just gonna add the migration firstly to the database, and then we'll handle our action methods. So just add migration one-to-many. Let's name this migration. And I'm just gonna update the database. Okay, the first thing I'm gonna do is go to the items controller. Let's start with the index action method. We're gonna need to include the categories when we search for the items in our context. So I'm just gonna place this a bit below in one line so that we can see everything better. So I'm just gonna write this that include method again, give it a variable like C, and just include the category when we search for the items in our database so that this is included as well. But now that we haven't connected actually any of our items with any categories, so we're going to need to set it up in our create page so that you know when you create like an object, you will have an option. Let's say when you create the item, you'll have the option to select one of the default categories. For this reason, we are going to need to display all of the categories that we have in our database in the create page. How we can do this? We're going to use the view data dictionary that we can use in ASP.NET Core. I'll name it here. We'll give it a name here of like category. And here we'll give a select list to this view data. What this select list will contain, we'll loop through the context to get the categories, and we'll search them by the ID, and we'll basically say here that we'll display them by their names. So we'll get the ID and the name of these categories from looping it through the database, and this list that will be created here will give it into our view data dictionary. We're going to need to write this using directive on top of our page. this using Microsoft.asp.NET Core.mvc.rendering, which basically is the directory that includes this class, the class for our select list. And now we have basically have a view data dictionary passed to our create page that we can use in our create view page. Let's go to our create view page here, and how we will access this. I'm going to need another div here, a form here for the user to be able to input a category when they create the items. So the label will be for the category ID. Let's say category here as the label for this form. And actually we are gonna need to use here like a select HTML tag. Here we need to specify this tag helper ASP4 to connect this to the category ID property. And in the ASP item, in the ASP items tag helper here, we're gonna need to include basically what we take from our view data dictionary. We can do this by writing view bag dot categories, which was the name of our view data, and the view bag is actually the class, just like a dictionary that we use to take this data that we have from our controller and display it here on the view pages. So this is as well another class, and I'm just going to give a class to our select list here of form control. And this is it with the view page. What we should write in our view page if we go back to the controller. Now, if we go to the post action method, we need to bind here the category ID that we'll take from that select list as well. And we could leave it as it is now, but we can do the same thing and modify the edit page as well, so that for the items where we haven't specified the category, we can edit them later. So I'm going to need this view data dictionary here to input in the edit method, in the edit action method. In the post method, we can include then the category ID, just the same way we did with our create method. And we are going to need to modify the edit view page by just giving it this line, this div group here for the list that we had from the create page. Let's input it in the edit view page. Just the same thing. So we're inputting like a form for us to modify the category as well. And if I run the application, let's just see how we can create an item with a category from the list of categories we have in our database, and how we can edit it for maybe the items where we didn't input a category. So if I just refresh here, let's go to the create page. Okay, so we have probably made like a typing mistake somewhere. This select text, I forgot an E. Select here as well. And let's just update it in the edit page as well. Okay, let me run the application one more time. Here we see in the category input here, we have a list of both of the categories that we have written in our database. So we can select either electronics or books. Since we have a books category, let me write the name for a book. Let's say tech book, like C# book. Let me give a price to it, like $20. The category is books. Let me submit it. We should be redirected to the index page. A C# book was created here. We had the price. We didn't give it a serial number, but we forgot to write a column for the categories actually. So let me go back to the project, to the index view page. Okay, just another column header here for the category, and down below as well to get the value of the category for each item. So item dot category dot name. We can input the question mark here. If it's null, we'll display nothing. Let me run the application one last time. At least I hope one last time. Okay, so we see here in the category column here, we see that for the item that we created, we see the books, the category. Now, since we changed the edit action method and the edit view page, we can basically edit these two other items to have a category as well. So if I go back to the first item and click on edit, we can input a category to the first item, click submit, and the keyboard now has an electronics category. Let's go to the microphone item. I'll leave it as electronics as well. Click on submit. So we changed the category for these two items as well. So the electronics category is connected to two items in this case. Let's say we have clients and items in our database. Each client can have multiple items, and each item can be bought by multiple clients. This creates a many-to-many relationship that we need to manage with a helper model. In this video, we'll cover how to set up the models, configure the relationships in the database, and make the necessary adjustments in our application. So let's just go back to our project, and our main model was the item model. Now, if we connect the item with a client model, let's say one item can be purchased by multiple clients, and one client may purchase multiple items as well. So this is a many-to-many relationship between the item and the client. Unlike the other relationships we've seen before, this type of relationship requires an additional helper model to connect these two models with one another, which we'll see in a bit. But firstly, let's just create a client model by just going to the models folder and adding a class for the client. And firstly, we'll just give it a public int ID property and a string name property. We'll initialize this property here to avoid the compiler warnings. And now, as I already said, we're going to need a helper model. So this client model will be firstly connected to this helper model in order then to be connected to the item model. We'll see this better after we create this helper model, which usually takes a combination of the names of the two original models. We can name this item client. And this model will be connected to both the client and to the item. For this reason, we are going to need firstly a public int item ID property to connect to the item, and of course an item property named item. So basically, using the item ID, this item client model will be connected to an item model. And the same thing will happen also for the client models. So we need a client ID property and a client property named client. So that basically what we're telling the item client here is that the item client model will be connected to the item and to the client using these foreign keys respectively. So the item ID for the item and the client ID for the client model. And in each of the other two models, we need to connect these two models with this helper model. And basically we need to have here a list property, a list of item clients, to connect our model with multiple item clients. I'll name it item clients as well. And I'll make this property nullable so that we do not have to assign a client firstly as soon as we create the item or as soon as we can create the client of that. And I'm going to copy this property and paste it in our client model as well. So basically the client here and the item as well are firstly connected with the item client, which then connects them to the specific item in this case, for example, in the case of the client. And now what we need to do is go to our context class and actually add these dbset instances of the two new models we created so that they will be stored as tables in our database. So public dbset client, I'll name it client, and also a dbset instance for our helper model. Named item clients. And unlike the other relationships, actually, we are going to need to specify this relationship of the item and the clients with the item clients model in our context as well. So just somewhere inside this onModel creating method, we'll basically firstly use the model builder class to specify the relationship of the item client model or entity with the item and the client. Basically here we'll firstly specify the foreign keys that are in this model. So item client, we need to write here that has key. So here we specify both of the foreign keys. Let's take a variable here, item client. We need to write the new keyword, and inside curly braces, then here we will specify the two foreign keys. So the item ID and the client ID. And in another line then we will basically specify the relationship that this item client model has with each of the two models. So here we specified the keys. Firstly, the foreign keys. Here we'll specify the relationship in a bit more detail. So we need to use the model builder class again. That entity item client So we basically say here that the item client entity is connected to the item model first. To the item model. And we write the with many method that specifies that an item can be connected to multiple item clients model. And we specify the foreign key again, which will be the item ID. And we'll copy, I'm just going to copy this line and do the same thing for the second relationship between the item client and the client model. So we just need to change here the relationship so it's connected to a client model with multiple, which is connected with multiple item clients, and the foreign key here will be the client ID. And that was it for our configurations in our DB context about the relationship between our three models. Now let's go to Package Manager console. Let me make this bigger and add another migration for the many-to-many relationship. I'll name it just many-to-many, the name of the migration. And the database schema or the migration was created. Now let's just update the database. So all of the changes we made in our project will be reflected in our database as well. everything was built successfully. So now for this video, I'm gonna go and see the database, and we're gonna populate the data in the database. So I'm just gonna go to the database that I connected with this application. Let me refresh it. If we go to tables, okay, I'm just firstly gonna go to the items table and click on edit top 200 rows so that we see the top 200 rows. Okay, let me just see the clients table, edit top 200 rows as well, and the item clients model. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here, let me just firstly create two clients, one with a name, let's say Zach, and one with the name like Martin. So we have two clients with ID of 1 and 2. Let me just find our items here. So our items, we have an item with the ID of 2, one with the ID of 4, and one with the ID of 102, 1002 actually. So I'm gonna connect in the item clients table here. I'm gonna connect the item with the ID of, I think, 2 with Zach here, which was a client with ID of 1, and the item with ID of 4 with Martin, and the other item had the ID of 1002, and I'll connect it with Zach as well. So Zach here has purchased 2 items, so to say. Okay, now that we have set up some data in our database, let's go to the project. I'm gonna need to go to the index action method in our controller actually, so that we include here when we query the items in our database, we want it to basically include also the list of clients with which an item is connected to. So here I'm going to add a new line and click on include. I see that item clients. And then in this case, in a many-to-many relationship model, we need then the then include method. So basically, after we include here the item client helper model, with which the item is connected, then we need to include with this then include method the client's model, because the item firstly is connected to the helper model, to the item clients model, and then it is connected to the client's model. I hope that's not too complicated. To the client. Okay, now I'm just going to need to go to the index page, to the index view page, and add a new table header here for the clients. And down below where we display the list of clients with which a model is connected to, I'm just going to use this table data tag here, and I'm actually going to use a for each loop, because one item may have multiple clients. Here we'll loop through a variable. I'll name it client in item clients, which is here. This was the temporary variable we created, and we'll loop through each item's item clients. Then we'll display the clients .client.name. So we are accessing for each item the item client's helper model, and then the client.name property of that model. Let me just run the application. Let's refresh the items route. We should see another column in our table, and we see for each item we see the client. So for the keyboard we see that the client is Zach, for the microphone is Martin, and for the book is Zach again. So basically in this case each item has only one client, but the client has 2 items. And this is basically how the many-to-many relationship works in ASP.NET Core MVC. If this video was helpful, YouTube thinks you should watch the video that's now appearing on the screen, so I'll see you there. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more content like this, and I'll see you soon.